Oh, let's get this camera in range. Ooh, a little bit too low. A little bit too low. Oh, there we go. That's more comfortable. Wait, just waiting for my cue here. All right, I'll just stop that. And welcome once again to ABAJAM Chronicles, readings of my books, chapter 2 this week. And I hope you all had a great week. I know I did, although, mind you, I'm not really happy about the weather. Today is Saturday. We went to the farmer's market this morning here in Brampton. When I had breakfast in the gazebo, it was nice and warm. And I go to the farmer's market, and also it gets really cold. I'm wearing a long sleeve top on right now, and I got long pants on instead of shorts. What is wrong with June? Anyways, I just want to say, again, welcome. And a little bit of backstory about ABAJAM Chronicles that you might not have known. This here, look at this. These are ABAJAM Chronicles. This is the first half of the book. This is the second half of the book. Before I went to the publisher, I had it printed off at Staples, just so I could have, give it to people to proofread it and everything else and see what it's all about. Whoa, that's a lot of paper. Anyways, and by the way, you'll notice I'm wearing a different cap today. Like, this will be my trademark signature for these videos. I have lots of hats and caps. I've been collecting hats and caps and wearing them since I was about 19 years of age, living in British Columbia. And there's a little bit of story there. I used to be, a dapper dresser, dressed to the nines, very fancy clothing, hats. I just started when I was about 19. And I was walking through, this is in Surrey, British Columbia, and I was walking through the Surrey Mall, and a couple of older women approached me. They had to be at least 21 or 22. And they actually complimented me on how I looked, my appearance, and the hat or the cap that I was wearing, whatever. And they made such an impression upon me that from that day forward, I'm 67 now, I've always worn a hat or a cap. So let's get back down to brass tacks. Excuse me. A cup of coffee with a little bit of Carolans in it. Goes nice on a cold day like today. Anyways, where do we leave off? Oh yes, Albert in chapter 1 was feeling pretty distraught. He was in his man cave, and he had just had a good talking to with Bernie. And anyways, everyone let it be known to him that it was his fault that they were in this particular situation. So now we're on chapter 2. ABAJAM Sanctuary. Just at that moment, when everything seemed hopeless, a real thought of inspiration came to me. Without hesitation, I gulped on the remaining whiskey in my glass and switched on my computer. It whirled to life as the 21-inch screen quickly displayed the Windows symbol along with 3 user icons. 2 for me and 1 for my wife. I chose the one she and I both had access to and typed in our mutual password. ABAJAM Sanctuary. How's that for irony? Originally, Bernie and I had concocted that catchphrase, ABAJAM Sanctuary, as a code word for our kids when they were young, should anyone approach them with the notion of picking them up on the guise of representing one of us. ABAJAM being the acronym of the first letter of each of our names, and Sanctuary was understood to be our home. Now here we were all together, plus a few unintended guests, stuck in a dire situation where this, our home, has truly become our sanctuary. I just have no intentions of changing ABAJAM to accommodate everyone else's first name. There seemed to be plenty of power available in the house's batteries. That felt reassuring, and right now I needed lots. The roof solar panels from my earlier inspection had not been damaged or adversely affected during our journey to this place. They still appeared to be functioning and generating solar power from this world's sun, from what I could determine, real sun. Sun, I might add, assuring myself with a form of self-speak, very much like our own. I'm seriously hoping it actually is. It actually is. The wind turbines, on the other hand, were a different matter. I would definitely have to fix them soon if we wanted more auxiliary backup power. My gas generators could supplement any additional electricity we needed for the immediate time being, but I suspected gas was going to become an extremely premium commodity around here in no time. I leaned over to the small stand holding the two printers and switched one of them on as well. I checked to see if there was enough paper in its tray, not really knowing how much writing would be involved. I suspected quite a lot. I've never been accused of brevity. Thank God for mass storage devices. It's a good thing I had foresight to buy one spare ink cartridge and refill kits. Yeah, I had foresight to buy spare ink cartridges and refill kits. I congratulated myself. I made a conscious decision, a precaution, to immediately print off each page as I entered it. Whatever I finished writing, I would store for safekeeping here in my gun safe. I might not have any answers, but perhaps by writing down everything that had transpired, I would be able to piece together the events that had led us all to this predicament. I'll show Bernie she's not the only one doing some serious thinking around our circumstances or about our circumstances. Okay, Albert, enough dawdling. Time to get writing. Date unknown. To whomever it may concern. My name is Albert Meisner. I'm writing this journal to chronicle the events that brought us to this place in the hope that, should I and everyone with me perish here and you find our remains, you will have a detailed explanation as to the events, past and current, as long as we remain, of who we were, where we came from, when we came to this place, and whether we fared well or not. As for both how and why at this time, that still remains a mystery. If we do not get back to our home, I'm hoping we will, then with any luck we'll have survived and fared well in this world for a long time. Only you and time will know the answer to that. If all this sounds kind of melodramatic, you should be in my shoes. Thinking of no one in particular. Right now, this dilemma is almost more than I can bear. You'll understand my anxiety as you read this journal. At the time of this writing, there are 12 other people here with me. That's my wife, Bernadette. I call her Bernie for short. My oldest daughter, Andrea. My son, Jason. And my youngest daughter, Allison. My father, Gerrit, or Jerry, as everyone calls him, because of the difficulty of pronouncing his Dutch name, is also with us, because he too has lived here since my mother passed away. Andrea's fiancé, Frank Huegel, is with us as well, but at the time of this writing, he is lying in a coma up in my daughter's old bedroom. According to our resident medical practitioner, his prognosis is grim. I sincerely pray to God he doesn't die, mostly for my daughter's sake, but as well for my sake. I'm pegging my hopes that he may very well have the answers to our current predicament. I'll divulge more on that later. 4 of our friends have had the great misfortune of joining us in this strange place as well. They are the Vanier family. There's Bill and his wife Jackie, their 2 sons, Steve, my son's best friend, and their teenage son Ryan. They left one son, the oldest, behind. His name is Sean, and he is a sergeant currently serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, for the record. This is an abbreviation meaning for the record, FTR. Many of the events leading up to and pertaining to our circumstances can be both directly and indirectly attributed to him and the modules. More information will be forthcoming. Having my friend Bill here is, for me at least, of some great comfort. Of everyone here, he appears to be far less agitated or anxious concerning our predicament. It's not that he underestimates or is unaware of it. It's more a matter of his demeanor. I do envy him. I'll explain more about him as well, and the others in greater detail later on. A friend and classmate of my youngest daughter, Allison, is with us as well. His full name is Thomas Emmanuel Batista, but he insists on being called just Tom, when he isn't hyperventilating, that is. It's kind of understandable. He has regrettably left his whole family behind. For now, we are his surrogate family. Personally, I don't envy him. We also have another unexpected guest who, unfortunately, just happened to be on our property when the event, as some here call it, took place. She has informed us her name is Tanya Levine, and that she is a master corporal in our armed forces. However, at this moment, her rank is completely irrelevant. Her sad misfortune and that of another soldier who apparently didn't survive the catastrophe, that's what I call it, was that of being assigned to eavesdrop on us. When she was found by our dogs and my daughter, she was apparently naked and unconscious. Her clothes had been blown off. Then again, so had some of mine and Bill's, no doubt as a result of the electric storm that precipitated the catastrophe. Good thing my wife has a sewing machine and knows how to use it, as this corporal wasn't interested in accepting any civilian clothing from us. I guess she figures she doesn't want to be out of uniform when the cavalry comes to her rescue. I've heard about lightning strikes causing clothes to explode off the wear, something about the moisture on the skin turning instantly into steam, rapidly expanding and bursting the clothes off. I wouldn't have believed it if it hadn't happened to us. We also found, lying beside her, some serious eavesdropping radio equipment, as well as her C7 assault rifle. She must have inadvertently stumbled upon my property just at the moment the event took place. Understandably, both she and Tom are taking this misfortune the hardest. For the time being, I have locked away her rifle for her and all our safety's sake. Apparently, both my family and the Vaniers have been under surveillance for some time. We were completely unaware. Well, sort of. Supposedly, according to this corporal, most of Canada's armed forces, along with a large contingent of Ontario provincial police, as well as some agents from national security, she wasn't sure of their identity, were situated just outside my gates. It seems an invasion of my little kingdom was imminent. If the circumstances weren't so dire, it's almost comical to think the Huns were just right outside my gates. She informed us that her companion, who, as I mentioned, supposedly didn't survive, was a private named Roger Daniels, also a radio man. We have not found any signs or remains of a body in the area where they scaled my fence at the moment of the lightning strike. Whether this other soldier died or not is merely supposition on her part. Now, between our two families and our 4 pets, 2 dogs and 2 cats, I assure you that none of the mysterious and for now inexplicable events that have brought us to this strange yet familiar location were planned or anticipated, other than the plans of having our friends visit us for this May's Victoria Day holiday long weekend. Oh, and some innocent experimentation with 2 alien artifacts I had salvaged. More about that will be discussed later on as well. I paused for a moment, thinking I was uncertain exactly how to proceed. Of course, the dates are important. FTR, for the record. The date on my computer still indicates that today is supposed to be Wednesday, May 21st, 2008. That is, if we were still where we should have been. Since the, again, event, which took place last Sunday, May 18th, nothing for the moment, as I've said, is definite. Hell, it's not even comprehensible. Not to any of us, and least of all me. A funny thought just occurred to me. I've never been one to keep a diary or a journal, recording all those supposedly important events in one's life. What made this situation all the more ironic is that the church I occasionally attend passes out these day planners at the start of each new year. Their intent was for parishioners like me to record or document things of spiritual significance as they might occur and or affect one's daily life. I've heard writing could prove to be cathartic. Anyways, some serious catharsis would be nice right about now, I thought, heaving a heavy sigh. I'm also pretty sure one of my filing cabinet drawers has several unused, unmarked planners hidden away in it. Perhaps I should start handing them out to the others as a diversion. I resumed my writing, still without any real sense of direction. I still find myself in a state of shock and disbelief, to be honest. I cannot fathom the events and circumstances that brought us here, or the events that have developed over the last few days. Truth be told, none of us can. None of us can comprehend the full magnitude of what happened 3 days ago. After all, to anyone who reads this journal, there's no one here by any definition that can be considered qualified other than Frank, who is probably more qualified as an engineer, but he does have some serious scientific knowledge and background. Well, perhaps a rocket scientist, he jokingly remarked to me and Bill just a few days ago, with a modicum of self-deprecation. Again, for the record. As for me, I'm but a modest, simple truck driver. I don't need to display any self-deprecation. The job speaks for itself. My kids, especially Allison, forever reminds me of my lowly station in life. I have taken numerous interest in upgrading courses over the years, but I make no pretense about who I am. Helps keep me humble, out of trouble, and fewer expectations for management and family. Or so, up till now. It seems like a legitimate excuse, I thought to myself as I paused my typing once again, that of being a simple, undereducated trucker. It is a common boast amongst my peers. Under normal circumstances, that excuse might have sufficed, but these weren't normal circumstances, were they? Actually, being a truck driver is what got me into this mess. Me, trying to be heroic at the time. Add into the equation my penchant for curiosity, and together they only help to exasperate our problem. I leaned back and briefly closed my eyes, but then I can't read. My mind easily drifted back to that fateful night in August, back in 1966, when Jason, Stevie, and I saw what we first presumed to be a burning meteorite. Then, mistakenly, a fiery plane crash into Lake Kennegamasi, near Timmins. From that moment on, our lives changed irrevocably. Everything I was seeing was so vivid, so real. I opened my eyes. That was really incredible. My thoughts abruptly returned to my task at hand. Try not to get distracted or ahead of myself. Steady now. Place fingers on keyboard. And then again, these three dots, which means I'm going back into my thoughts. I'm painfully aware of the fact that just 2 floors above and a few rooms away, my daughter's fiancé is in a coma and the second casualty of the event, or Black Sunday, as she refers to it. Jackie is genuinely fearful for his life. She's doing all she can with what limited resources and medical supplies are available to her. Thank God for her medical expertise and her unorthodox attitude towards preparedness for any contingency. In that regard, she's much like me. Again, FTR, for the record. Jackie just recently wrote her final exam to become a nurse practitioner. I personally am unfamiliar with all the details and or requisites of her profession and career or what it entails. For my daughter, Andrea, though, it is enough to know that someone with a great deal of medical expertise and experience is on hand. For that, we're all grateful. I sat upright in my chair, pausing to briefly reflect on Frank's condition, his enthusiasm about last weekend and the circumstances that brought about this dilemma. What were you thinking, Frank? His actions were puzzling that day, and it's still a mystery to me why he was so determined to pursue his experimentation. I now realize I should have objected more strongly, but I didn't. After all, he's the one who's studying to get his master's degree in mechatronics engineering, whatever that is. He is also the only one here right now with some background in theoretical physics, albeit sorely limited, he'd assure everyone. It was just a minor in my courses. I won't be building any atomic bombs anytime soon, he'd jokingly add. I recalled from some of our past discussions that he had more than a passing interest in quantum mechanics. Personally, I think he was just being modest. Sort of like me, I thought. Only modester, if I may be permitted to make up a word. Andrea recently confided to me Frank's idea of a great evening out was attending a lecture at the Perimeter Institute. Supposedly his heroes are Stephen Hawking, Carl Sagan, and that string theory guy, Brian Greene. Oh yeah, and Mike Lazardus, the CEO of RIM. No capes or comic book heroes for him, no sirree. Well, I have to admit that personally, if Frank came out of his coma right now, he'd be my hero, not to mention my savior. He'd save me from having to share in some of the blame, as well as deliver me from this dilemma of lacking any definitive answers. I had to remind myself that was the whole reason he and Andrea invited that visiting professor from the Perimeter Institute, along with his engineering friend from work, to come over last weekend. Now, regrettably, my hope, lies upstairs in a coma, and damn it, I'm still stone sober. I'm kind of wondering if that professor and Frank's friend ever made it to the house after the incident, or what they might now be thinking about all of this. Come to think of it, I hope they didn't get arrested by the Army or CSIS, our Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, or INSET. That's supposed to stand for Integrated National Security Enforcement Team. And of course, whoever else was supposedly lurking just outside our gates, according to this Master Corporal. I can well imagine that would have been quite the surprise for them. I resumed my writing, hoping to distract myself from my growing remorse about Frank, the others, and my own self-guilt. On the day of the event, an explosion happened in the garage directly below my father's apartment, where Frank was conducting some scientific experiments on those two modules. I had retrieved. Frank was conducting some scientific experiments on those two modules I had retrieved from an alien spaceship that had crashed almost a dozen years earlier. In the ensuing explosion, Frank was critically injured, and it appears both modules suffered severe damage. Again, FTR. For the record, during those intervening years, aside from a brief period of respite, I had a precarious and tenuous, to say the least, symbiotic relationship with those alien modules. Since the explosion, my symbiotic or psychic connection to the modules seems to have been severed. I've always suspected the modules were biomechanical devices, but at the time I had retrieved them, I could not have known or anticipated their power or influence over me. Since the explosion, though, I seem to have been completely freed of their power and all ties with them. My thoughts are no longer being muddled or subject to their sometimes less than subtle attempts at influencing me. Again, to whomever reads this, of this phenomena, I'll provide greater clarity sometime later as my story progresses. I apologize for any confusion my text may create for you. I'm just attempting to maintain some semblance of order and brevity, which I've been told I lack. Otherwise, I'll continue to get sidetracked. Like right now, for instance, I thought to myself. Anyway, these two supposedly innocuous objects, what I and the boys came to refer to as modules, somehow brought about this incredible catastrophe. Yet how could two such seemingly small objects be instruments powerful enough to create the phenomena of taking us, my whole property, and everything within the fence's perimeters, or connected electrically, like the dock, my houseboat, and Jason's plane, to this other world? At the time of this writing, as far as the others are concerned, they're not fully convinced this is still our world. I'm still not completely convinced either, but less so, only because of our flyover on Monday. Good thing I convinced Jason to bring his float plane over for the weekend. For now, let it be stated, it still remains a mystery as to exactly where and when we are. I stopped my writing and pushed my seat back. I got up from my desk to stretch my legs. I needed a mental break. I so desperately wanted to make some sense of it all. That's why I, so supposedly needed Frank, so desperately needed Frank to come out of his coma. I'm also kind of hoping the modules are not beyond repair, if that's even possible. Otherwise, we're not leaving here. Slowly walking around my den, taking a few moments to look at family photos, examining the readings on my wall's chronometer, review my books and study courses, and stare out the window onto the property seemed to help me collect my thoughts and recall many of those past events. Now I should put those into some form of chronological order. I returned to my comfortable seat to resume writing. Here are some clues you may wish to consider that preceded the event. Again, in quotation marks. There was an unexpected lightning storm that quickly rolled over our area. It was followed by a couple of powerful nearby lightning strikes. The last one, I suspect, hit the transformer just out my property's gate. I'm assuming the storm, with those subsequent lightning strikes, was the actual catalyst that precipitated the events that somehow enabled the modules to transport us here. Of course, for now it's just conjecture on my part. But it would explain a lot and it's all I've got. Excuse me while I get a little more comfortable. All right. And an amusing thought just then occurred to me. It's like Doc Brown exclaimed in the movie Back to the Future when he needed substantial power to send Michael J. Fox through time. Where else can you get 1.21 gigawatts of power other than a nuclear reaction? How about a bolt of lightning or two and a couple of alien modules thrown into the mix? But that was a DeLorean being transferred through time, and a fictional movie at that. Here we're talking about 6.5 acres of land, house, barn, trucks, cars, etc., that ended up who knows where, let alone when. And let's not forget, this is now our reality. I'm definitely going to have to rewatch that movie. My temporary amusement soon gave way to those annoying, anxious, thoughts again. What if we do survive? Frankly, I'm not really hopeful. At least not until we get more answers, and I really doubt I'll find any answers in a movie. Exactly where, or should I say, when we are. Okay, exactly where, or should I say when we are, only God knows. And I meant that literally. So a rescue is out of the question, unless, of course, God. But that's kind of doubtful. Oh, me of little faith. My next question is, would Andrea ever forgive me for bringing this calamity upon her should Frank die? For that matter, would any of the others? That too is seriously doubtful, which of course would make survival all the more tenuous. As that saying goes, a house divided against itself, and in this case, divided primarily against me. I'm definitely not feeling too hopeful right now. I took one more longing glance at the large bottle of whiskey. I sighed and resignedly declined to do any more drinking today. Besides, it's just a waste of good whiskey. I got up again and put the jug back into the cabinet, locking it behind me. I returned to my self-imposed task. Again in italics. Now, as to our location, I'm hazarding a wild guess that we may possibly still be situated along Lake Erie, just east of the peninsula called Long Point. The others will only agree with Jason and my preliminary assessment from our brief flyover of the region that it does look like the same place. The local topography at least demonstrates that much. Granted, the conclusions wasn't all reassuring to the others once they got to view the video I had taken. As I previously stated, the others still don't believe this is actually our own Earth. After considering what I've seen, I surmise this is definitely not the same time period. On the other hand, other than a few incongruities, like a forest of immense trees surrounding the property and huge towering white pines elsewhere in the general vicinity, trees that weren't there last Sunday, all the landmarks appeared more or less the same. Oh yeah, the water level upon our arrival just happened to be a few feet higher than what we're generally accustomed to. Again, assuming it is Lake Erie. When Jason and I flew over the area, going as far east as where Hamilton should have been, in the hope of finding some signs of civilization and a much-needed hospital, then flying over Niagara Falls and following along the southern shore, the geography definitely seemed to be southern Ontario and the Niagara Peninsula. As we no longer had GPS, we couldn't rely on his plane's instruments other than old-fashioned compass and altimeter. But that's where all similarities ended. As far as we could see from an altitude of between 8 and 9,000 feet ASL, above sea level, there were no signs of modern civilization. None of our neighbors' houses or barns was to be seen. No buildings of any kind, no highways, no streets, not even the Welland Canal for that matter. Not even a single boat on the lake other than mine moored alongside the dock. There were no power lines or towers or the smokestacks of Nanticoke. No cities or towns on any horizon. All we saw was a vast expanse of greenery with the occasional few large clearings. What Jason and I did see near some of those clearings were several fortified villages of various size, all situated throughout this greater peninsula region. I have seen those kind of dwellings before. only they were small reconstructs of indigenous Aboriginal longhouses common to this area many hundreds of years ago. Unfortunately, it doesn't answer the timeline question, as there is nothing distinct in their design that can attribute them to a given period or what year this might be. The discovery of these Indian villages and what they may portend is one of the most disturbing revelations at the moment to all of us here. It was the primary reason we flew so high. We were trying to avoid any observation or detection. Personal note to self. I'm especially glad I do have a small arsenal of guns with substantial ammunition, especially considering the compound isn't fortified and at the moment is quite vulnerable. The ramp leading down to the shore and the dock where my houseboat and Jason's new plane are moored suffered significant damage. The pedestrian stairway fared no better, but at least it's easily repairable. The concrete ramp is another matter. Bringing the boat and plane back up into the compound won't be happening anytime soon. The chain link security fence is also in need of considerable repair, and right now warrants our top priority. It was originally put up to keep out the occasional trespasser, usually nosy police accompanied by CSIS or some INSET agents. I never intended it to repel an assault from the military, let alone the possibility of an attack by hostile warring Indians. Again, in exclamation marks. This is something I'll definitely need to discuss with the others within the next day or two. I'm just not looking forward to adding more anxiety or fear to a group of people, some of whom are already in a borderline state of panic. My son and I had to restrict our flying time in order to conserve precious fuel. During our initial reconnaissance flight, we all held out some faint hope that somehow, somewhere, we'd find some indication or sign of civilization. Not necessarily a modern hospital, but some kind of medical facility that we could fly frank to for any kind of reasonable care and attention. I admit it was a faint hope, more for Andrea's sake than ours. But now, with the revelation of our true circumstances, there being no sign of civilization within flying distance, any hope of finding help has all but evaporated. Of this one fact I am certain: the events that occurred over a period of almost 12 years and that ultimately culminated in this calamity began with my, Jason, and Steve's encounter with a spacecraft that crashed in northern Ontario at Lake Kennegamassie. In my chance encounter with the aliens and my, I admit, unwise retrieval, truth be told, theft, of the two modules, both now severely damaged and still lying on the garage bench along with the rest of the equipment, it was those actions I now realize and take responsibility for that precipitated all the subsequent events that ultimately brought us to this place. I pushed myself away from the computer and exhaled a deep sigh. There, I finally admitted to my full participation in this calamity and even put it into writing. That should make Bernie and Jackie happy, providing I let them read it. I scoffed. Besides, I thought I needed to get it off my chest anyway, so okay. Now how and where do I continue? I was thinking that in order to help myself write the narrative, I should tell the story in the form of a book, chronicling all the details, dates, contributions the others have made to the story, I intended to enlist the help of the others whenever necessary, allowing them to contribute and describe, through their perspective, all the things that happened to them in those intervening dozen years. Perhaps that might shed some light on why we're here. It's time for me to fulfill some of my other responsibilities and obligations. No real hurry with the writing. We're not going anywhere soon, I suspect. And that was the ending of reading chapter number 2. And here is a picture, okay, if I can hold it up, of Jason and Albert's flying over the area. And there's an Indian village below. Anyways, next week is chapter 3, Two Families and Their Uninvited Guest. I hope to see you all here next week. Anyways, thank you for dropping by. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Excuse me while I cue up the music. And say, have a nice Sunday. Okay. Time to go up for dinner.